Welcome into the latest edition of the Pump Fake, everybody. Jarrett Bailey, the head coach of our program, Todd Haley. I'm back home after my trek across Midwestern America. Although Pittsburgh, you say, isn't Midwest, so I guess the only the Indiana portion of this is. Did you say? Oh, is Ohio Midwest?
Yeah, Ohio's Midwest.
Okay. What's the official cutoff point? Is it like the Pennsylvania Ohio border?
Yep.
The official? Okay.
Western PA. Western PA.
I found out Monday that Jim Tressel's the lieutenant governor of Ohio. That surprised me. You drive in, it's like, oh, welcome to Ohio, governor, whoever, and then Lieutenant Governor Jim Tressel's like, get the fuck out of here.
Yeah.
So that made me laugh a little bit. How was your week, Ben? We talked like last Tuesday or so. Haven't done a show since then, but yeah, I was very busy in Indianapolis. How are you?
I'm doing good. Busy week on the field here in Dallas with the UFL, but got to talk to one of my favorite people in the world, football world for sure, Dick LeBeau.
Dick's down there.
Brett Kiesel. No, I just on the phone, but Brett Kiesel
good.
posted a picture of Coach LeBeau, and we were seatmates on away trips with the Steelers for 5 years. Missed those times, but he's amazing. He and my dad came out in the same draft, 1959, born in the same year, 1937. And this picture Brett Kiesel posted because Dick showed up to his daughter's hockey tournament. Tells you what kind of guy he is. I mean, he looks like he's 60 max. I mean, scratch golfer still, full head of hair, Hall of Fame as a player, Hall of Fame as a coach if he wanted to be. The gene pool, he got all the good genes. I mean, it's amazing, but what a great person. So it was great to catch up with him a little bit.
Oh, terrific. And a few people in the comment section. If you want to be part of the conversation, please do leave a comment. We'll get you on board here. Lots to talk about today, actually, which is nice. I mean, it's early March. Usually we have to wait at least another week before stuff actually begins to happen. So that was good. The biggest news of today was David Montgomery getting traded to the Houston Texans. There have been murmurs about this over the last week or so from the combine. David Montgomery just wanting a bigger role. Really saw his role diminish with the Lions this past season as Jahmyr Gibbs really set himself apart in terms of the top running backs in the NFL. I think this is perfect in terms of the player and the situation. You and I have talked, after the Houston playoff debacle. One of the things you pointed out is like, they need to get a real running game behind C.J. Stroud. You add a guy like David Montgomery, that goes a long way to help out a quarterback who might have had his confidence shot a little bit after a rough playoff performance. So I think this is an A+ trade for Houston, getting a player like David Montgomery.
Yeah, I think it, in any good trade, both teams, you want them to feel like they won. And I think this is a win-win. With Jahmyr Gibbs, what he's doing when he's not on the field and you're watching the Lions, you're like, gosh, why isn't Gibbs in? And that's no slight on David. He's a really good back too, but as they've morphed from kind of that thunder lightning type deal to mostly Jahmyr Gibbs, which again, if I'm calling plays, I want him on the field as much as I possibly can have him out there. So the Lions get a 4th round pick, a 7th round pick next year, and a lineman, right? So
they need Juice Scruggs. Yes.
Yeah, they're in kind of a retool mode. The window is not going to be open forever. So, I mean, they got to figure some things out. And then the Texans, the great mystery is Joe Mixon. I mean, what happened? I don't know. Nothing has been said of how he missed the entire year. So, he was so good for him 2 years ago. So they get a quality back. They need to, the draft picks will help the Lions. So, I think Houston is kind of in a retool the offensive line, and it appears, whether it's free agency or the draft, that they're unloading guys because the last 2 years it hasn't looked good up front, and that's been a part of C.J. Stroud's struggles. So I think they're kind of retool the offensive line mode, get a running back that can play and help in the backfield. So a win-win in my opinion.
Yeah, so the official compensation for this, the Texans get David Montgomery, the Lions get a 4th-round pick, a 7th-round pick, and Juice Scruggs. And probably not a coincidence that they also released Graham Glasgow today. So bringing in Scruggs, he's probably going to play some part in what they do along the offensive line this season. Yeah, the Lions are in an interesting spot, right? Where, they had a couple year run where they were, the cream of the crop in the NFC. Started off this past season really well and then just fell apart down the stretch, miss out on the postseason altogether. So with what they have in play right now, we know they have an Amon Ra. Jahmyr Gibbs is obviously incredible. Going toward the free agency and the draft, I would expect them to get a little bit aggressive and maybe add a proven name, whether that be via trade or whatever they have to do to get back to the top of that mountain.
Yeah, they are in an interesting spot. I mean, because I think we're all shocked that they weren't in the playoff mix,
Yep.
after the year before. So, again, Jared Goff's just another year older. I'm on St. Brown's in his prime, Jahmyr Gibbs in his prime. They got some young defensive players, but I think the loss of Frank Ragnow really hurt them. He did so much heavy lifting at the center position that probably took a lot of pressure off of Goff. He had less to worry about. So I think that probably got under appreciated that, and they couldn't do anything about it. I mean, he decided to retire and tried to come back and failed the physical. So I think that was a big thing for them. So the Lions got to figure things out. And the Texans got to figure things out because, I think they're at their point where, just getting there isn't enough, while they have this young, talented quarterback in CJ.
Yeah, they've won a playoff game in each of the last 3 seasons, but they've also been eliminated in the divisional round in each of the last 3 seasons. So I don't expect any sort of like hot seat conversations to happen about D'Amico Ryans because I think that would be pretty foolish. But yeah, I'm sure that he's not naive to the fact that they keep kind of hitting this wall and they got to do all they can to get past it. All right, let's go to Pittsburgh, where Mike DeFabo of The Athletic reports that there are at least 6 teams in the league that are interested in a Pat Freiermuth trade. You pounded the Pat Freiermuth drum all season, and in games where he became a big factor, good things tended to happen offensively. We saw he had that huge game against Cincinnati on the road on Thursday night where Rodgers and Flacco went back and forth. And anytime that Pat has been a focal point of the offense, like I said, good things do tend to happen. They paid him ahead of the 2024 season. He set a career high in catches and touchdowns that year. Last year saw his production fall as Darnell Washington became a bigger part of the offense and Pat Freiermuth, just got fewer looks. But with a new head coach, a new regime led by Mike McCarthy and a new offense, I would be surprised to see Pittsburgh move on from Freiermuth, who, as they themselves have a lack of proven weapons. They do have Freiermuth, who was one of the, few constants since his rookie year in 2021, who's still part of the team. So I wouldn't expect a trade to happen, but I would hope for his case or for his sake and the Steelers' offense sake that they find ways to get him the ball more this season.
Yeah, absolutely. I was frustrated at times, especially when Washington went down. But this Darnell Washington, if he comes back healthy, I mean, I would think he's got a chance to be a showcase type guy. Meaning, when you're game planning, you're thinking about DK Metcalf, you're thinking about the running backs, and you're thinking about a tight end. So who is that tight end? I'd hate to see Pat Freiermuth move on. Now it might be good for him, but he's a Steeler in my mind. I know the fans love him. He's just one of those guys that gives a little spark when he makes a play, a la Heath Miller, kind of. So would hate to see it, but I think anytime you have a change of staff like the Steelers have, I mean, I think anything's out there. Anything could happen. So I think it's going to come down to what does Mike McCarthy think? What does the offensive staff think? Do they want to ride with Darnell Washington and then try to gain some capital by moving Pat? But like I said, he's one of those Steelers that I'd hate to see it. but it's a new era right now in Pittsburgh.
Yeah, and like I said, you go back to 2021, you look at all the changes that have happened from his rookie year till now, all the different quarterbacks, all the different receivers who have come and gone. Deontay Johnson and George Pickens, and now DK Metcalf with, whether he's catching passes from Pickett or Fields or Wilson or Ben, Najee coming and going, all the offensive line turnover. He has been one of, if maybe the only guy who's still there from 2021. I have to go back and look, but I don't think that there are many other guys who have been there for that long on the offensive side of the ball. So we've seen him go, and again, time moves so fast where we're talking about Pat Freiermuth is like one of the veteran leaders of the Steelers now. But that's what he's become. And I applaud him so much for the fact that there were times where he wouldn't get any looks during games. Never once did he go to the media and bitch and moan about it. He didn't make it about himself. He said it after the season. He's like, yeah, I wish I was, a little bit bigger part of the offense, but I wasn't gonna, bash anybody or call anybody out during the season and, make it about me. So I think he deserves an immense amount of credit for that. And it shows the quality of his character, both as a teammate and as a person. And like I said, I think with a new offense with Mike McCarthy, that tends to be a little bit more pass heavy. We'll see Pat Freiermuth get back to, getting 60 plus catches a year and finding the end zone a little bit more.
Yeah, I hope so, because they got a pretty nice tandem right there, between Pat and Darnell. So, and they both can block. They're both like true Ys, and a Y to me is a guy that can block and run routes. So where an F is more of just a move guy, receiver. So, they got two Ys, which is a asset as an offense, I think, because, you can line up in a balanced set with one on each side and run either direction. You can throw the football, to both of them, obviously. So I hope he remains a Steeler. I've been watching a lot of 16-17 tape here at the UFL with some of the players, seeing a lot of Jesse James, but Pat just and Jesse was great, low key, just like Heath. Pat, great, just like Heath in that way. Not gonna complain a lot, just goes about his business in a way that I respect. So I hope he remains a Steeler and they figure out a way to get him more involved.
Yeah, and if they can make just one nice signing at receiver or a draft pick, a guy like Romeo Doubs is available in free agency. Even if you do that, give yourself a tandem of DK Metcalf and Romeo Doubs with Pat Freiermuth, Darnell Washington in the pass game. And if you wanted to get one more weapon, if you use your first round pick on a receiver, all of a sudden, the offense gets retooled pretty quickly just by making a couple moves. So hopefully, for the offense's sake, we'll see what happens with the quarterback position. We talked to Omar Khan at the combine. I just asked him, point blank, would the preference be to have Aaron back? And it sounds like the preference is to have Aaron back. And, you and I have, shared our thoughts on that in terms of what that means long-term. Obviously, he's not going to be the long-term guy, and that just kind of, I don't know, kicks the can down the road a little bit more. But if that is who's going to be back, then you better surround him with some weapons to distribute the ball to.
Yeah, I think that became evident as the season wore on and the competition got tougher, that there were limitations. I mean, I think Aaron gives you a chance week in and week out to win, but I think as the season goes on and as I said, you start getting into those playoff type games, I saw limitations, and it's only going to go downhill from there. I mean, that's just the way Father Time works. As much as I love Aaron, but yeah, I was thinking about that today. I'm like, now if you surround Aaron Rodgers, this draft for receivers looks deep. There's a lot of big, fast guys. If you can get some weapons out there and be able to run the football, can you win with Aaron Rodgers? Yeah, and I think you could probably win in the playoffs. But it just they didn't match up. They didn't quite have enough arsenal, I think, down the stretch. At some of those skill positions. So it's going to be really interesting to see what how they handle it, because it's obviously the number one question.
How much, and this is perfect for the combine because we see these quarterbacks, do these drills with the receivers and whatnot. They get to showcase, kind of the zip and the amount of air that they can put on a ball. But buyer beware the throw against air. We saw Penn State's Drew Aller was kind of the talk of last week, and that's a guy who has the size, and he's a big, like 6'4", 6'5" guy, has the athleticism, has the tools, and has the big arm. A lot of people think that the Andy Kotelnicki offense kind of limited what he was able to put on display, where it was very RPO heavy and focused on limiting mistakes rather than taking chances downfield. And obviously Penn State didn't have the year that they would have liked to this past season, and Drew got hurt. But Drew Aller's name is going to be a name that we're going to keep seeing connected to Pittsburgh as a guy who they could potentially take day 2, or hell, Jackson Dart was a 3rd round pick at this time last year and ended up going in round 1. So I don't know how much of him you've watched, but from anything that you know on Drew Aller, what would be your takeaway from that?
Beware of throws on air at the combine. But you got to dig deep on all these guys. I mean, you cannot leave any stone left unturned because, I was just on Sirius XM earlier this morning, and that was the question I asked. We had Matt Miller on, who's a draft Nick type guy, doing mock drafts and all that. And I said, who's the Jackson Dart of this year? Ty Simpson is a guy that I think is going to climb. But Aller, like you said, the guys are going to climb because teams are desperate. And when you're desperate, you start overlooking some things that maybe you shouldn't overlook. But then you got a Josh Allen. I mean, he was all over the TV this week. Every time the quarterbacks were out there, they showed him launching the ball, and it came to fruition. So, but having been a part of that 17 draft, or 18 draft, I know, all that went into it of trying to figure out which of those guys that particular year were guys that had a chance. So it's just gonna ramp up because there are some desperate teams. I mean, you go down the list, all the teams that potentially, have to have a quarterback that don't have one right now. Miami, Atlanta, what's going to happen there? Arizona, Pittsburgh. I mean, there are some teams that are really desperate. So you just have to be really careful. Are you getting a Mitch Trubisky who hasn't played a lot, or and in the case of Ty Simpson, he's only played 1 year. He's thrown 500 passes. Or are you getting Josh Allen that the upside is so great and the ceiling is so great that you're willing to take that chance? So, a big athletic guy that can throw, that was on air, but I would say beware, be careful, and just, really dig deep and figure out what he's really made of.
Yeah, and that's kind of the game that scouts and coaches and GMs play, right? Where we saw Zach Wilson have one of those similar throws at his pro day or whatever, where he's running to his left and he just launches a missile across the field, and I'm sure that played a big part in him going number 2 overall. Or are you going to have? Is it going to end up being closer on the Josh Allen scale, or are you going to be closer on the Zach Wilson scale? So that is the question that a lot of these coaches, GMs are going to really have to weigh. You've done a lot of these drafts. What's the mindset when the quarterback class and the consensus on the quarterback class is that, all right, these guys, maybe one of them is as a 1st round pick, but after that it's slim pickings?
I think it's the quarterback position evaluation is tougher than any other one. Maybe kicker, because kickers, it's a mental game, and somebody might look like they're unbelievable, and then all of a sudden they crack under pressure. Quarterback's the toughest. That's why we see so many failures at this position. It's more about, everybody can see a NFL type arm, everybody can see an NFL type body. Now it becomes that the 90% neck up stuff. Just what are they made up of? What have they been through? How smart are they? How football smart are they? How coachable are they? And kind of what is their opinion of themselves? I mean, quarterback position is so much about confidence and then being planted in the right garden, so to speak, with the right coaches. We've seen certain guys come to life, Sam Darnold being one, Baker Mayfield being one that, we probably were ready to just brush aside, that all of a sudden now, Sam Darnold winning a Super Bowl. So it's a very tough thing to evaluate because, coaches and scouts, they love the black and white. Okay, runs this, he's this big. How long are his arms? I mean, my girlfriend's like, he's 6 foot and 1/8 inches. I mean, how particular are they going to be? And I go, no, it's big. That 1/8 of an inch is a big thing. Arm length, all those things. I mean, there's a standard that is held true for a long time. Yes, there's always some that you didn't think could do it that do it, but generally, just percentages and all those things are in your favor if you can check all those physical boxes. And then now you're to the mental of just what does a guy make, what is his makeup and what's his football makeup.
Well, if I'm going down the Richard Todd Haley quarterback list here, let's see. He's got pretty good size, a good symmetrical jawline, and
gene pool rule. Don't forget the gene pool rule.
Yes. Yeah. So I mean, I have to go back and see if Drew Aller's father was like an Olympian, but we'll do that at another time. Yeah, I'm going to be fascinated by this. Obviously, my rooting interest is in Pittsburgh, covering the team and whatnot, and growing up a fan of the team. I also am a Penn State fan, and I don't hide that. So there might be a little bit of bias when it comes to Drew Aller here. It's also been made
Think with your head. Think with your head, not with your heart.
And that's the thing too, man. It's like I was long a Drew Aller defender. Last season he didn't play well and then he gets injured. So this is a guy going into the college football season who was projected, a potential top 10 pick. We've seen that go down pretty drastically. As we've seen with guys like Cade Klubnik, Lenora Sellers was supposed to be a big name coming out of this class, and things change as the college football season goes on. But Pittsburgh's going to be one of those names to, even if Aaron Rodgers does come back come April, if they decide to do anything at the quarterback position. If you want to be part of the conversation, you're watching this live, Super Chat should be open. And if you leave any amount of Super Chat, we'll read it on air. Let's go to more news. Albert Breer reported that a trade for Maxx Crosby could happen as soon as this week. 6 teams that Albert listed. Let me get them pulled up here. Baltimore and Buffalo are 2 of the big prominent ones. Along in there, I believe, is the Chicago Bears. Let's get this pulled up here real quick. All right, here we go. So the Dallas Cowboys, Chicago Bears, Baltimore Ravens, Buffalo Bills, New England Patriots, Philadelphia Eagles, and Los Angeles Rams are all teams keeping tabs on Maxx Crosby. And of course, I'm sure that there are about a dozen other teams keeping tabs, but in terms of, the real players to watch, it's more than likely going to be a contending team that would be willing to send the king's ransom it would take to get Maxx Crosby. Howard also notes that it would take a package probably to the like of what Micah Parsons was dealt for last offseason. So a couple first rounders and a couple first rounders and a player. That was Kenny Clark that got dealt to Dallas. So I would like to see Maxx Crosby playing meaningful football in December and January. He hasn't really done that since he's been a Raider. Any of those teams, I mean, obviously, again, we know where my rooting interests lie outside of Pittsburgh, and they are in Buffalo with Josh Allen. So unapologetically so, that would be cool. But, I mean, going to New England would be very cool. Going to, defending AFC champions, trying to be the final piece that helps get them over the top. I would rather see Maxx Crosby join the Taliban than join the Philadelphia Eagles, personally. I don't need to see the Philadelphia Eagles get anything else nice and get back to a Super Bowl. That's all right.
I mean, he's a great player. One of my favorite defensive players to watch. I mean, the effort, the attitude, the never quit, regardless of the circumstances. So I'm kind of in your camp. I'd love to see him get an opportunity to play for a contender. It is rich, though. When you talk about what you'd have to give in return. And I think what's going to be really interesting, and you were out there in Indy, I mean, there's a nice handful of defensive players that have some ability rushing the quarterback. It looks like to me, I know they haven't played a snap in the NFL, so what direction our team's going to go? Are they going to try to get that quick fix with the player they know and they know exactly what they're getting, or are they going to try to go through the draft and get one of these young guys that's big and fast and has been productive? So going to be really interesting. But yeah, I mean, we know Philly. I would say put him as the leader in the clubhouse right now to get Maxx. If they're going to move him, I mean, who would you bet on more than Philly to be the ones that get him? But it's a lot. It's a high asking price and well worth it. But still, that's quality young players that you don't have to pay a ton of money early on in their careers.
Right. And yeah, Philadelphia, we know that Howie's going to be aggressive. We've also known that Les Snead in Los Angeles is more than okay saying, yeah, to hell with these 2 first-round picks. Matthew Stafford, we only, however long he's going to keep playing at this level, we need to try to take advantage of it and get another ring out of it. So I think those are probably the 2 teams I would watch most for because they have the 2 most aggressive general managers. When it comes to Buffalo, if there was a Hall of Fame for almost trading for somebody, Brandon Beane would be in it. So that is something where if I am Brandon Beane, knowing the implications of this season for the Bills and knowing the offseason that they've already had where their actions have largely said this is all of our shortcomings are largely on Sean McDermott. We're going to, promote Joe Brady. We're going to promote Brandon Beane to president of football, and we're going to move forward. Well, if you want to make a big statement and finally help get over that hump, the one thing that they've really lacked is a pass rush, especially in the postseason. So I understand it would take a couple first-round picks, but frankly speaking, the Bills haven't been good at drafting in the first round anyway. So do what you got to do to get them. The funniest outcome would be Jerry in Dallas, like just making the same trade twice, except this time he's sending the capital back in exchange for Maxx Crosby. That would be very silly.
Yeah, these owners and GMs and presidents, they're prideful guys. I mean, they don't necessarily want to admit making a mistake, or doing something that then they just redid. That would be funny, but hard for me, knowing Mr. Jones and Steven, to see them just come about face and redo what they already undid. So, but yeah, Buffalo Maxx. I mean, I would think he would tick the Vegas Super Bowl odds pretty quickly if all of a sudden he became a Buffalo Bill. But I just know, we know they need a receiver. They need some help in some other areas, interior defensive line. When Oliver goes down, they can't, they look like a defense that can't stop anybody. So, they got things to get right. But yeah, no doubt. If Maxx Crosby is on one side of the ball and Josh Allen is on the other, I'd take my chances.
I mean, Chicago's another team listed here, and once upon a time, they made another trade for another Raiders pass rusher and Khalil Mack. That ended up panning out pretty well that season and helping lead them to an NFC North title. So, yeah, over the next week, we're certainly going to see what goes down with Maxx Crosby in that regard. And I think those are the biggest headlines from today. We're a week away from legal tampering beginning, which again, hilarious term, legal tampering, as opposed to what?
Legal cheating.
Yeah, basically. But we've already seen a couple trades go down. We didn't talk.
Hall pass. The movie comes to mind. You get a hall pass. I mean,
that makes sense. Yes. We did see another trade. Tyus Howard being dealt from Houston to Cleveland. This is the second straight year that the Texans have been really active in getting rid of their offensive linemen and kind of retooling. Granted, their offensive line wasn't very good this season, so but getting rid of Howard was a little bit surprising on that front.
Yeah, like I said, I think D'Amico and his and the front office, they've had enough. They changed coordinators, they've changed players. They got to get it right though. They know they have a really talented quarterback in C.J. Stroud, which I haven't lost faith in him. just watching the games, there's some things that need fixing, and it usually starts with getting better players up front. So I see them unloading these guys, trying to gather some ammo, going into the draft, going into free agency, and retooling that whole front five as best they can, because there's a lot of things to love about the Texans, as you said. Playoff wins in the last 3 years, that hadn't been done. The defense, I think, is going to continue to be really, really good. They just need to help this quarterback out by protecting him up front, and that it's not just players. I mean, coaches, they gotta get it straight.
All right, let's talk about trades that you've been in the organization for, whether that be getting a good player or seeing one go away, and what that does to like a coaching staff and the players on the roster. Were you in Dallas when T.O. got there?
Yeah.
Talk to me about everything Terrell Owens right now, because were you the receivers coach in Dallas when he got there?
I was receiver coach, pass game coordinator, but I was coaching the receivers. Yeah.
And then Terrell Owens comes from Philadelphia to Dallas. Immediately, what's the first thought in your head?
As a receiver coach, I was really excited. I mean, this guy, I had done work on him coming out. How could you not be excited to have a guy of that ability? You knew there was going to be some other things that came with it. And Jarrett, I'm telling you, we were out in Oxnard, California for our first training camp with him. And I'm like, this, and I had a couple buddies that had been on teams where he was, San Fran and different places. And they were telling me, hey, be careful, this, that, and the other you got to worry about. And I'm calling them, halfway through training camp saying, this guy's nothing like what you guys told me. I mean, he would come into my little office trailer, be sitting on the edge of his seat, eyes open, asking questions. We're watching tape, just he and I. I'm like, he's nothing like what we've seen on the news and doing sit-ups in the driveway and all that stuff. The season started, well, first he had his little Tour de France incident when he had a little hammy and he sat on the bike with the yellow jersey. That didn't make Bill Parcells real happy. And then the season started, and it's like he morphed into a different person. I mean, sleeping in the meetings. I mean, we're putting in a play that's named after him or his school. And, I'm looking back and having a pound on the desk to say, this play is your play, so it just was unbelievable. And then that whole season, I mean, it was like the Super Bowl every other week in Dallas. I mean, with all the media trucks, with the big radar things on them, helicopters flying over the facility. I mean, it was really unbelievable. I mean, there might be 100 media trucks out there every day through a couple of those stretches. So, did he make some plays for us? Absolutely. But, I interviewed for the head job after that season, one of many, on the staff and outside. And that was the first question. What do you think about Terrell Owens? From Jerry Jones and Steven. And I said, we won 10 games with him. I can't prove it, but I feel like we would have won more without him. It was that big of a distraction. So, got him at the tail end, but a great player. So, whenever you're involved in free agency, trades, those things, you got to really know what these guys are about, what their makeup is, and how they're going to fit within your locker room. And, and that was one that, as great of a player as he is, it just didn't, it didn't fit, and it didn't work out, at least that year for us.
Yeah, then he goes to Buffalo for, I think, just a year, and then Cincinnati briefly. Yeah, he bounced all over the place. Oh man, can you imagine? And like, I love Chad Johnson, but like what Marvin Lewis was going on behind the doors with both Chad and Terrell on the same team. I think they had a TV show at the time too when they were on. That must have been a circus.
Oh, it's a lot, but I'm coaching these young UFL receivers, and all they want to hear about is AB, and they all have listened to the outside perception. Oh, how did you handle him? I said he was the best. Was he late for meetings, team meetings? Yes, but Mike T handled it, and we moved on. As far as a meeting guy, practices, games, he was the best. I mean, he worked harder than anybody, ran harder than anybody, and made a ton of plays for us. So I can only speak for me. I enjoyed my time with AB very, very much. I mean, and he was on a Hall of Fame type track during that stretch.
Was there any trades that happened when you were the head coach in Kansas City that either you were like, oh, hell yeah, we got this guy, or you saw one of the guys go away and you're like, oh, why did we trade him?
We traded for Matt Castle very early in
Right.
my tenure and Mike Vrabel. And we won a division 2 years later, or the next year, not the year we traded for him. So, Matt Castle had his pluses, had his minuses. Mike Vrabel was awesome, even though he was an older player at that time. I mean, awesome for me as a first-year head coach to have a veteran in the locker room that could, not only give me some advice, sound advice at times, in game, out of game, in the locker room, but also handled, a team that we were trying to turn around from being a 2-win team the year before I got there into a 10-win division winner, 2 years later. So that's probably the biggest one, to me, is getting Mike Vrabel, with still a little tread on the tire. I mean, and what he brought to me and to us was awesome.
I love it. We will be back later on in the week. Todd will tell us more stories. We'll break down everything going into free agency, any more trades that could take place. Keep an eye on Maxx Crosby. Keep an eye on a bunch of these guys that are on the trade block and expected to get moved. So appreciate everybody for tuning in. If you're not already subscribed to the channel, please be sure to do that. We are here, and this is also a fun part of the show. We get the live count. We are just under 7,700. So yeah, if you want to get us to like 8,000 before the end of the week, that would be neat. Get us to 10,000 before like April. That would be good. So once you get to 10, Todd, they say once you get to 10, getting to 25 gets really easy. Once you get to 25, that is just a monster.
10,000, I'll take my shirt off.
Oh, all right. Well, we've got it right here. There we go. Maybe if we get to 20, I'll take my shirt off. And maybe we'll do a bench press contest. That'd be good. I bet you. I haven't benched since college, and even when I did, I'm 5'8", 160. I can't lift things. That's not my forte. Were you ever a big lifter when you were,
No, I was a quarterback and a golfer. You don't want to be too bulked up. My arms are too long for bench. I mean, I could get 225, 5, 6, 7 times, maybe a little more way back when I was in shape, but yeah, I was never going for a max.
Yeah, so we did like a max thing where it's like a lifting program. Right? If you could do like a certain amount of weight this amount of times and your max was this, you could do it one time. I think the highest I got was maybe like 180. Which, to be fair, that was when I was in high school. And I was probably like
more than your body weight.
Yeah, I was going to say I was probably like 135 at that time. So like I was a little bit bigger, but or at least a little bit more toned. But yeah, no, I'm not built I'm not a bodybuilder by any means, but if you get us to 20,000, maybe we'll see what we can arrange. But appreciate everybody for tuning in. Again, we'll be back later on in the week. Be sure to subscribe, comment, do all that good stuff. Stay tuned for clips from the show. If you missed the entire show, we'll be back later on in the week right here on the Pump Fake.